Yo, what is up, family? How y'all doing today? Hope everyone's having a beautiful day, lovely evening, wherever you're at. So good vibes, positivity, much love. Today I'm gonna go over a little bit of higher time frame perspective, lower time frame perspective. What I really mean by this is understanding that the higher time frame bias necessarily is what you want to stay with. I made a couple mistakes this week, looking at the lower time frames when I was looking for my entry points, and I was getting mistaken by understanding that what I was looking for on the lower time frames ultimately was just the correction of the lower time frame into the higher time by bias. Apologize. Um, and about my second year, my first almost end of first year and the second year of trading, I really had to stop doing this because it was something that kept messing up my accounts, blowing my accounts. Um, and it was really, I wouldn't say necessarily a rookie move, but a move that I had made before that I just kept doing for some reason. Because I was more or less looking to have the best entry rather than have not necessarily the best entry, but have the entry rather than not have the best entry for myself. And I'll kind of go over that right now. So what we're gonna do is start off the daily, and I'm kind of gonna go over just a little bit of what I'm speaking upon. I'm gonna draw pretty much a higher high, higher low concept with just the brush here. So higher high, higher low, higher high. Oops, that's kind of ugly. Hold on, do that again. So higher high, higher low, higher high, higher low, higher high, higher low. And this ultimately is let's make it black here, and this will be the daily time frame. Okay. And what I mean by this is that within the daily time frame, we're continuously making higher highs, higher lows, higher highs, higher lows, higher highs, higher lows. But let's say that we're coming down to maybe to the 1 hour time frame, okay? And then you would have something as like this. So you have a higher high, higher low, higher high, higher low, higher high, higher low, lower low, lower high, lower low, lower high, lower low. Oh wait, I apologize. Let me maybe do that. Kind of confused myself there, but so on the 1 hour we have a higher high, higher low, higher high, higher low, higher high, higher low, higher high, lower low, lower high, lower low, lower high, equal bottoms, higher high, higher low, higher high, higher low, higher high, higher low, higher high, higher low, and so forth and so on. Okay. And what I'm gonna change this down to the lower time frame just so we can kind of see where it's at. Let me take this off of auto. That way I can move this. Um, sorry, where I can move this up here and so we can see. Okay. So what I mean by this is you see how on the higher time frame, this is a higher high on the black line. We'll call it just black line, which is high for higher time frame, daily, higher low. But within this ultimate move of the daily, we also have higher highs, higher lows, higher highs, higher lows, higher high, higher lows, lower highs, lower lows created here. Um, and although you can trade from this high to this low, you come into a point of interest or a point of, I guess you would say, structure, resistance, depending on what you want to call it. There's different words for it, different terms, sorry. But you really have to understand that the higher time frame is probably the bias you want to stay with, okay? And this is where I kept getting messed up here. I was looking to sell here, and then when I got to here for the previous higher low on the higher time frame, I was looking for it to continuation of the sell like this. I was looking for it to go like this and then just continue down. But ultimately, the higher time frame on the black line is the true aspect of the higher high, higher low situation where the trend will continue. I'm not a trend biased person. I don't really, care to say, oh, this trend line is going to make it go this way. I trade smart money, so most trends for me are targets of area that I'm looking for them to come down and sweep before they make the initial move. That's kind of a different video, but my point is not to get confused with this and start trading the counter trend on the lower time frame, even though you can, but don't let it change your bias on the higher time frame. Okay. And we're gonna go over this on the actual chart now. Then I'm gonna give you a little bit of examples as far as like what I missed or what occurred to me, what I didn't pay attention to. With this one here, we're gonna actually do the arrows. That way it's a little bit more nice than my kind of ugly drawing there. So as you can see here, we have a higher high, higher low, higher high, higher low, higher high, higher low over here. And then we have a higher high that should continue this way. Now it may at this point come here and go like this. This may be a possibility. But my point of this is understanding, um, you know, where I should have stayed with my perspective. Let me change these real quick to black. And actually we'll do this. Now let's just leave these green. And I'll just move this to, okay, so the green is gonna be the higher, and then we're gonna do the lower time frame right here in a second, okay? So now, but let's say I go to the 1 hour, okay? Let me move this way, okay? So then you can see within the actual, the daily on the green, we're gonna go do this again throughout, you know, here, but we're gonna change it to a different time frame. So as you can see here, we have a higher high. We change the color to the blue. We have a higher low, higher high, higher low, higher high, higher low, higher high, so on and forth for here. Now, being with this point right here, this could have been that area where we have a lower low, to where we might be. I could have been looking for here in order to sell down this way, but ultimately this here was the area of where the market had just to retest from the previous higher low, okay, or the previous low of the last high here. This is what I'm talking about as far as not getting confused. You can also see right here, let's say, oops, just a second. Let's say for an example, we could come up here and this is the higher high of that time frame. But when I started to come here, I could be looking for lower low, lower high, lower low, lower high, lower low, lower high, and then looking for the lower low here. But what occurs if you kind of get rid of all this is this here is ultimately playing off of this previous high. So higher high, change that to green. So this ultimately is the higher high, this is the higher low, the higher high. But ultimately, when I started to see this bearish narrative on the 1 hour, I forgot that on the daily, that overall, this is still a bullish aspect. Okay. And that's what you have to be very careful of, is making sure that you pay attention to the higher aspect, because sometimes, although you can play the counter trend trade, it's not always the best, because you have to know when to get out and not when to just stay in and just be like, okay, it's going to continue. Now, don't get me wrong, it could come down here for the lows, when something that I was kind of looking for is for them to come clear up this price action. But ultimately, it's better to stay with the idea of what the higher time frame is doing, rather than try to, you know, pick the bottoms or tops. So what I'm saying is pick the turnaround and which the market's going to continue, or do the opposite way. Same thing right here. Let me use this here. So with this being the previous low here on this side, so higher high, higher low. Second, guys. Okay, so with this being the last higher high, technically this is the higher high, this is the higher low, this is the higher high. Now I kept having a not like, I wouldn't say like a bad idea. I just kept on the 1 hour. What I was trying to do here was, rather than staying with this bullish aspect here of higher high, higher low, 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 higher high possibly, or we can do a lower low and then come down to ultimately this area here where this previous high was. Oops, hold on one second, guys. So this is a possibility for them to come down here. But my point to this was, this whole week at every top here, I kept selling here to look for them to come down here when the market wasn't ready. So when I would sell up here, this is, I believe, London session open right here, I would sell looking for them to come here and then continue the trace downwards to sell. But ultimately what they were doing was they were just creating higher highs based off the previous support level. So this is where I started to get, you know, like I said, messed up, because I started to trade this looking for this to break into the lower lows down here of area where I was kind of interested. Sorry, guys. So like this, was really interested in this area here between these two blue lines as my point of target. But for me, what I kept doing was I kept trying to pick the tops and try to sell down here. I kept breaking even, or I would, you know, ultimately, you know, lose a trade when they would come back above my original entry point. Like right here, I sold, and then a couple hours later, it was above here. I lost that trade. Same thing here. I sold, and it came up a little bit more. So what I'm talking about is just understanding that don't ever necessarily try to pick the top. There is a point of where you'll learn to understand, like at certain points of where they're coming to, as far as clearing a top from the previous. So for what I'm talking about for that example is they cleared this top here with this here, and then now they pushed a little bit down, but ultimately they could play off of this and continue the bullish aspect is kind of like what they're looking at right now, or they can continue down here to this next level. But my point is staying with the higher time frame bias, because ultimately, as you see here, this is a bearish here from this area over here, because we do have this lower low, lower high, lower low, lower high, lower low. But now we're in the aspect of a higher high, higher low, higher high, higher low, higher high. And now we're kind of in an instance where we're in, I guess, the higher time frame, we're consolidating, but ultimately we could be, coming up back up here to closing some of this price action up here. But we don't know that yet. But my point of it is when you're in a higher time frame bias, just stay with what it's doing. And then if you take a loss and the market decides to turn, as kind of like right now, you'll see that it looks like it's kind of going to turn rather than holding this support level here. Rather than holding the support level here, it looks like it might turn and continue down, and finally maybe come into this area here. But it's a very hard, not necessarily, but it's a very risky trade to continue to sell when the market is bullish on a higher time frame. Because like I said, I've in a long, and not only now, but when I started, one of my biggest issues, and not biggest issues, but one of my biggest things that I shouldn't have did was I kept selling when I should be buying, because I was going against the trend, looking for the top to sell, looking for the top to sell, looking for the top to sell, looking for the top to sell. That doesn't always work in a bullish trend. Same thing with the sell, trying to find the bottom. So like, let's say you try to buy here and you could have bought, but then ultimately it came down. You try to buy here and it came down. You try to buy here, it came up a little bit, came down. You really have to look for structure to be made in order for it to really show you what it's doing. It's not always going to work how you want it to work, and it's okay, but the safer bet is staying with the trend, and just knowing that eventually you're going to catch something to go with the trend more than you will on the against the trend. Okay, for like this example, if I was going to buy, I'd buy from this point down here, but it never came back down here. So I might have actually in the past looked for the sell here at this previous top here. I think I probably did. I wouldn't doubt it this week. 1 second. So I might have looked for something like this. So something like this, probably off of this here. But obviously you could see that they just went straight through it and continued. So rather than me looking for the sell, I should look with the new bias for the bullish aspect here. And this is something I just kind of wanted to go over with, because I have, like I said, made plenty of mistakes in the past with this. And sometimes it's a little bit of a headache, but it's part of, the process of learning. You just have to understand, where the price is going, and kind of look at the higher aspects of candlesticks. So now everyone might not trade candlesticks, and that's okay. But as we see here, this previous candlestick that was printed was a candlestick of more or less equal. There's no really bias of bullish or bearish. There's no, bull of the black, then there's no bullish. No, there's no bearish of the blue for me, and there's no bullish or aspect of a body for the continuation of the bullish. So ultimately now we open here, and you can see how price is starting to print a bearish candle here. Now it can continue to fall now that I see the higher time frame, but as if we look at to where I was the rest of the week, you see all of these candles are bullish, bullish, bullish. This one is somewhat bearish, but very, very, very little, a few. But my point is trying to sell at every bullish candle isn't necessarily the best idea. You more or less want to sell the bearish, bearish, bearish candles, and then look for the bullish aspect really to buy more than anything. So that's just something I kind of wanted to go over with, something that hopefully it can help some people, because for me, um, I have had this issue where, I just kept trying to pick the bottom or the top, and sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes it does, and it's wonderful, but I would say probably 70-60% of the time it didn't work for me. You just really have to be spot on of where you want your entry. Let's look at another pair. I'm gonna look at GU because that was another thing that I did. Um, Another similar pair that I kept trying to pick the bottom or the tops this week. I remember selling here down to here, and ultimately I should have known that in general, like if you just want to use support and resistance, that this is going to be a support area. Also, this in here was an imbalance, and there's liquidity under here, so I trade smart money, understanding that there was probably someone that had bought originally there. So for an example, they probably bought here, and then they probably moved their stop loss to break even so that they can continue to move up. And then ultimately, what do? They come back in, probably at their stop loss, and then they take them out. So I should have known better, especially. So another thing is, this is kind of separate from the higher lows and higher highs, and the lower lows, lower highs. But most support areas or lower lows or lower highs are created with London session. So London session being for me, because I'm specific standard time, about 12 to 1 o'clock. So as you can see here, 12, 1 o'clock, and then you start to see the market move back up. So they'll sell into London session and continue up. Same thing here. Okay, this one is different because I remember I was kind of upset at what this did because I didn't really see it. But they came in London, they sold down into New York, and then they ultimately used FOMC, which is the rate statement for the US economy, to continue the bullish pattern up this way. Okay. And then if we look over here, the same thing over here. So here, so London session is right here, came up, sold in the London session, continued up, continued this way throughout the day, came up with London session the next day, sold, bought up here, continued consolidation, came in the London session again, bought up here, and then we already talked about this. So just kind of understand that your timing of sessions also is really going to be very effective of where the market's going. So as we can see now, they might be selling off, because actually that's pretty crazy, because on my other chart, this was actually a candle that I was interested in here for them to come up into, in order for me to look for a sell to possibly come back into this down here to rebalance. That's kind of upsetting. Not too much, but it is kind of like, oh man, like that's exactly what I was looking for the whole week. So as you guys see here, this here, all of this, I was looking to pick the tops for them to sell off down to here, and I kept missing it. So every time I came to a high, I would look to sell, look to sell, look to sell. And then at the beginning of the week, I ultimately was looking on my own computer, I was looking at this as my area to sell. And then now you see how it comes into it. And then look at the price action that's occurring now. It's a bearish kind of aspect here. Let's look at the daily. So now this is still kind of a bullish market, so it could go up. But my point of that is being patient. If you have an area of where you're interested in for to sell from, like a true area of a meaning, and for me, this is the reason why, is because I wanted them to clear all these highs before they sold back down into here. But instead of me being patient, I just kept forcing it and forcing it and forcing it. And now look at what they're probably going to do. They're probably going to sell it off now. And more than likely, I'm going to miss the move that I originally wanted from the week, but that's part of learning. You're never, regardless of how good your skill set is, you're never done to where you can't say that oh, I don't need to learn anymore. And if you do, maybe you don't need to learn anymore. Maybe you have perfected your craft. But for me personally, I believe there's always something to learn, because these markets continue to move. They don't ever continue to do the same thing. You can learn to, use your favorite type of, I guess, your trade idea, or your whatever you see as the market. So for me, I like to trade this idea for the sell here. So as you can see here, it's 1, 2, take top, break down, come back up. Well, this might have been the up here, but ultimately right here, and then the sell down would be my kind of idea of a sell. Same thing with the buy aspect. You can call this an inverted head and shoulders, whatever you want it. This to me is liquidity, double bottoms, double top, liquidity, capture, capture, retest of broken structure, BOS here, and then the continuation of that move. So for an example, here you have 1, 2, break of structure, retest, which is this is a pretty low retest here, but this is because it was FOMC, so it's news that causes big wick, continuation, okay? On the selling aspect here, I don't really see it as of now. Let me look at a bearish idea, okay? Give me 1 second, guys. I want to find a good, nice one that it's very visible. So what I like to see, I don't really like any of these. To me, these are all kind of just, although they are bearish for me, I don't really care for, okay, so this might be a nice one. It's kind of still ugly, but you understand what I mean. So 1, 2, liquidity, break a structure, retest, and then the continuation. So they continued here. With that wick, they ended up coming back into those previous liquidity points where they took price above it, grabbed it, and then ran. Okay. So this is what I'm kind of speaking upon. Those are my ideas of how I like to trade, or patterns I like to see that in order to trade. And ultimately, when I started doing the patterns that I can see indefinitely and trade them, ended up becoming a lot more beneficiary in my accounts, rather than trying to trade something like this where I don't really see that. It's just consolidation, break, and then this continuation. Even though it does break structure here technically, there's really no hard drive to take liquidity above it in order to come down. So as you see over here, there's a hard drive to take liquidity above it and then come down. Same thing here. This is a top. They take hard drive liquidity to come down, they break below, they come back, retest, and they run. So that's kind of the pattern I like to trade. And I'm sorry I got off a little bit off a topic there, but definitely stay with the trend on the higher time frame and never, you know, I'm not saying never trade against it, because there will be a point in trading where you'll start to see where the opportunity to sell back into an imbalance or an area that has yet to be really filled into. So as you can see here, this is just for an example, a higher high. Now we should look for the higher low, for the higher high, the higher low. So we should look to continue this. But right now, this is on the daily. So on the 1 hour, we could be looking for this area to get filled in. If not, maybe this area over here to be, a little bit priced better. But my point is you can sell this because it is a big move, but don't, I'm not saying don't do this, but don't be upset if you come to a structure support or support area or a previous low, and then price, rather than coming down here, ultimately just does this like that, and then ends up going bullish. Don't be upset if that occurs, because at this point, this could be that point where they don't want to come lower, or it could come down to here and they can do the same thing, come this way, or they can come down one more lower. You just never really kind of know. But my point in that is understanding that since the higher time frame is bullish, when you come to sell back into these, I guess you would say on this side it's a higher high, on this side it would be considered the higher low. So here, when you look to sell that, don't be surprised if it doesn't sell through, because ultimately on the higher time frame it's a bullish aspect. So I apologize if I babbled on a little bit there, guys. I just kind of wanted to give you an idea of higher highs and higher lows, and how to remember to stay to the higher time frame bias, rather than just assuming that it's going to turn when you want it to. Because I can say for a fact that this week that was something that definitely bit me in the butt more than once. And I should have just stayed to what the true bias was. So hope this gave a little bit of info, maybe a little bit of my mistakes can help people in the future understand something that I struggled with for a long time. And as you see, sometimes you forget to you forget your rules and you forget what not to do. So Much love. Peace out. Have a wonderful, evening, day, weekend. Definitely stay safe out there throughout the weekend. Spend some good time with family, loved ones, and much love.